Chapter 18. The Wicked Stepmother. Red was inseparable from her new pet. While the others rested on the lower deck after their encounter with the Snow Queen, the sound of Red playing fetch with Claudius kept them tossing and turning in their cots. "Fetch, Claudius," Red encouraged in a loud and high-pitched voice. "Come on, boy, go get the stick. Bring it back to Mommy." Since they had decided it was best for the granny to fly conveniently at night, everyone on board was struggling to adjust to the nocturnal traveling schedule, getting sleep whenever they could, and Red wasn't helping matters. A loud clank came from the upper deck that caused everyone to jolt. "That's it," Goldilocks said, jumping off her cot. She ran up the steps to the upper deck and was mortified by what she saw. Red was using the ice scepter to play fetch with Claudius. "Are you insane?" Goldilocks said, yanking the scepter out of the pup's mouth. "What? He likes it," Red said. The twins could hear the conversation as clear as a bell below, and they worried these moments would be Red's last. "You're really not helping my urge to throw you and that mutt off this ship," Goldilocks said. Red ignored her. She hummed a tune to herself and took a seat on the other side of the deck. Claudius curled up in Red's lap and went to sleep as she stroked his bushy gray fur. "Pets have always suited me so well, and motherhood is no exception," Red said. "Isn't it amazing how quickly we bonded? What are the chances a poor dog would be stranded in the wilderness and rescued by a fabulous queen? I feel like we're living in a story." Goldilocks had enough. It was time to burst Red's bubble. "He treats you like his mother because he actually thinks you're his mother," Goldilocks said. "He's bonding with your coat, Red, not you. Claudius is a wolf." "What?" Red said with a laugh, as if it was the most perpetuous thing she had ever heard in her life. "That's ridiculous. There's no way Claudius is a—" Her voice trailed off. She looked down and saw Claudius sucking on one of her buttons off her coat, disappointed no milk was coming from him. Red was suddenly aware of the familiarity of his teeth, his ears, his snout, and his fur. She had seen all of these features before, just on a larger scale. A piercing scream erupted from the back of Red's throat. "Wolf!" She jumped in her feet and pushed Claudius to the ground. "Get away from me! Get away from me!" Jack, Froggy, and the twins climbed to the upper deck when she heard the screaming. They were afraid Goldilocks might have finally lost her patience and tried to murder Red. But Goldilocks was just leaning on the banister, watching Claudius chase Red around the deck with a huge smile on his face. "Don't just stand there, help me!" Red yelled at Jack and the twins. She was running in circles, and Claudius was playfully barking up at her, thinking they were playing another game. "Darling, please calm down," Froggy said. "He's just a tiny little—" "He's a bloodthirsty killer," Red screamed. "Just look at him. He's probably plotting to kill me in my sleep since he came aboard." "He's not the only one," Goldilocks said. "Get away from me, you ferocious beast," Red yelled over her shoulder at the baby wolf. The twins found her choice of words to be a bit extreme. The wolf cub didn't seem threatening in the slightest, especially as Claudius was now chasing his own tail. "Perhaps you could raise them to be unferocious, my love," Froggy suggested. "Name one example of that method working," Red yelled. Froggy drew a blank. "That's because you can take the wolf out of the wilderness, but you can't take the wilderness out of the wolf." Red sat on the banister, and Claudius jumped up at her, trying to join her in the ship's edge. He grew tired of jumping up for Red's affection, sat on the floor just below her with his oversized paws spread in front of him. "Don't look at me like that," Red said. "I can't be your mother if I'm constantly worried you're going to maul me to death now, can I?" A singular sad yell came out of the pup, and he looked at her sideways. "I have a history with wolves, you know," Red said. "One almost gobbled me up and my grandmother up when I was a little girl. A wall was built around my kingdom to keep out the things like you. Surely you can understand the inconvenience." Claudius whimpered, somehow understanding the young queen. He moped over to Froggy, feeling like he had been abandoned for a second time. "There, old chap," Froggy said, and picked up the tiny wolf. "We'll find you a nice home, don't worry." Red stayed on the banister for the majority of the day, too afraid to move. That night, as soon as the sun set, Jack fired up the ship and Froggy steered it south. It sailed through the clouds of the northern kingdom to their next destination, Cinderella's wicked stepmother's estate. Jack and Froggy took shifts through the night navigating the Granny. The twins tried to sleep, but it was difficult with the Granny rocking along the midnight sky, and because Red was talking in her sleep. "Oh my, what soft fur you have, little Claudius," Red said, and stroked an imaginary dog in her bed. "Oh my, what small, non-threatening teeth you have. Oh my, what strong, non-growing bones you have. Oh my, what delicate little diet of fruits and vegetables you have." Goldilocks had successfully blocked out the noise with a pillow wrapped around her head. Alex wasn't so lucky. Not only did she have Red talking in her sleep to drown out, but she also had the fear of what the Snow Queen had told her in the cavern. Out of the 4 travelers, one would not return. What did it mean? Was she referring to the twins Jack and Goldilocks? Was she telling Alex that one of them was going to die? Had she actually made a true prophecy, or was he just trying to get into Alex's head? Alex wondered if anyone had literally worried themselves to death, because if not, she would probably going to be the first. Her thoughts were overwhelming, and Alex finally gave up on the idea of sleep. She got up from her cot and discovered her brother had done the same. She climbed up to the upper deck and found him leaning on the banister facing the east. He held a quill, and a stack of parchment was spread in front of him. It was quiet out here. Only the sounds of the Granny's sails flapping in the wind and the flickering of the central flame could be heard. "You couldn't sleep either?" Alex asked. "I don't think someone comatose would sleep through all of that," he said. "What are you doing?" Alex said, gesturing to his quill and parchment. "Not homework, I hope. I think he'll be allowed to turn a couple late assignments, given the circumstances." "No, I'm just writing," Connor said. "I'm making notes of all the things we've seen and the places we've been so far. I don't want to forget anything. I might make a couple short stories out of it. The Snow Queen's polar bear servants, Red having a pet wolf, pheasant pudding. It's all good stuff." "That's great," Alex said. "I hope you get to use them." Alex said it without thinking. Connor stopped writing and took a deep breath. "Alex, we're going to save Mom," he said firmly. Alex didn't know what to say. "I hope so." "No, I need you to hear it. Say it." "We won't be able to do it unless we both believe it." Alex found the confidence in his brother's eyes contagious. "We're going to save Mom," Alex said, this time fully believing it. Connor smiled. "Good," he said. "Thanks for that." "What keeps you so positive? Usually I'm the one giving the pep talks, but you've been boosting my morale since we got here. What are our options? If I have the choice of being doubtful or being hopeful, I'm going to choose hopeful. It takes less work to be positive." Alex smiled at him. "That's a nice way to see things." "And," Connor added, "you know, once we save Mom's life, there's no way she'll be able to tell us no again." Alex laughed and covered her mouth, forgetting the rest of the ship was asleep. "Okay, now you're getting your hopes up way too much." Twins savored the thought. Connor's right. It was much easier than letting their minds fill with doubt. A cool breeze suddenly blew past the ship and shivers went down their spines. "Did you feel that?" Alex asked. "Yeah, what's going on?" Alex looked over the shoulder and gasped. "Connor, look!" The twins... She turned her brother in the direction she was facing. Slowly gliding toward them was the ghost Connor had seen in Red's castle. And there was something so majestic, so regal, and yet so frightening about her all at the same time. "It's the ghost," Connor whispered. "That's the one I was telling you about." The ghost's gaze grew more serious as she approached them. "Well, say something to it," Alex elbowed her brother. "What am I supposed to say? I don't speak ghost." The spirit stopped and hovered a few feet in front of them. She never blinked or looked away from the twins. Whoever she was a very serious spirit. "Who are you?" Alex peeped. The ghost remained silent and still as ever. "What do you want from us?" Connor squeaked. The ghost raised her hand and simply pointed to the distance. As the Granny passed through a weak cloud and a veil of mist brushed past them, the ghost vanished. The twins' hearts were racing. "Who was that?" Alex asked. "I wish I knew," Connor said. "Why is she following me?" Alex thought about it. Spirit had looked so familiar to her, but she couldn't put her finger on why. She was trying to tell us something. The granny settled into the countryside of the charming kingdom just before sunup. Luckily, only a few grazing cows witnessed the large ship descending from the sky, and they weren't the least bit interested in it. The twins kept the second ghost sighting to themselves, not wanting to cause any further worry. "So what's the plan, Connor?" asked the others. "How are we going to discover and steal the stepmother's most prized possession?" Goldilocks and Jack looked to each other and both shrugged. Froggy stepped forward and cleared his throat with a small croak. "If I may, I believe I'll be quite useful at organizing this scheme. I am from the charming kingdom, after all," he said. "By all means," Alex said, and gestured for the frog to take the floor. "The stepmother," Froggy declared with a finger raised, as if he were giving them a history lesson, "has always been obsessed with titles and social status. Remember how desperately she wanted her daughters to marry my brother? If we want to get into her home and discover what her most prized possession is, we'll have to do it in a very formal manner, and I think I know just how to do it." Froggy turned red. "Me?" she asked. "What do I have to do with anything?" "You're a queen, my dear," Froggy said. "The stepmother would never resist the chance of having a royal in her home." Red rolled her eyes and folded her arms. "Oh, now I'm a queen? Now you're all respecting my rank?" she said. "Precisely," Froggy said. "You'll go to her home and request a sitting with her. Have a look around and pocket whatever you see she values the most." "Request a sitting for what?" Red asked. "What could I possibly need to talk to her about?" Connor was quick to come up with an answer. "Tell her you're designing a country home, and Cinderella told you to look at her old house for inspiration," he said. Alex patted him on the shoulder. "Good one," she said. Red looked from side to side. They could tell the idea was marinating in her head. "Yes, that is a rather good idea. A splendid idea, in fact. I've always wanted a country home, actually. This may not be such a lie after all," she said, and happily collected her hands. "Am I going alone?" Froggy looked around at the others. "I'm afraid everyone here would look a bit suspicious if any of us were to go with you," he said. "We can go with you," Red Alex said. "We'll pretend to be your cousins." Red looked at the twins up and down, and her face scrunched up disapprovingly. "Can we be second cousins? Our bone structures are just so different. I'm not sure anyone would believe it." A dagger flew through the air and stabbed to the wall a few inches away from Red's head. She screamed and fell to the floor. Everyone turned to Goldilocks. Her hand was still extended from the throw. "Sorry, it slipped," Goldilocks said with a shrug. Once Red recovered from Goldilocks' accident, she dressed herself to the day's mission. She wore a red fascinator and an exceptionally fluffy red dress. Apparently, Red had been saving this outfit for a special occasion on their trip and figured this was the best place to show it off. Jack and Goldilocks stayed to keep an eye on the ship. Froggy escorted Red and the twins through the charming countryside. He wore one of Red's scarves around his head to conceal his amphibian skin. Red complained about her shoes the entire time as they walked, but the twins had grown so accustomed to her complaining, it didn't bother them. Large storybook estates began popping up on the sides of the path as they walked further into the kingdom. Some were made of bricks, others were covered in ivy, and many had pointed straw roofs, just like the twins' grandmother's cottage. Farther off in the distance, they could make out the tops of Cinderella's palace towers. It was the nicest neighborhood the twins had ever walked through in the fairy tale world. "This is making me so excited to play on my country house," Red said. The twins rolled their eyes. At least Red didn't have a cover to blow. "What's that over there?" Connor asked and pointed ahead of them. A large display was gated off to the side of the path. They walked to the edge of the gate and looked inside. A very old and large decaying pumpkin was on the ground. It was like a jack-o'-lantern that had been left outside for far too long after Halloween. "Read this," Alex said, and pointed to the plaque placed on the ground. "The royal pumpkin remains. These are the remains of the carriage that escorted Queen Cinderella to a renowned ball on the night she met King Charming. The pumpkin was magically transformed into a carriage by the fairy godmother, but at midnight the spell was broken, and the pumpkin turned back into its original form. It has rested here ever since Cinderella's legendary dash." Our grandma would be behind the most famous curfew in history, wouldn't she?" Connor said to his sister. Red squinted at the rotting pumpkin. "She swept floors rode in a pumpkin and was friends with mice, and somehow Cinderella sets the bar for all the other queens, she said to herself. I'll never understand that. This means we're very close, Froggy said. The stepmother's estate should only be a little ways farther down the path. I don't want her to recognize me, so I'll wait for you here. Best of luck. Red air kissed them, and she and the twins continued down the path. A few minutes later, they reached the stepmother's estate. It was not what they had been expecting. Had the twins not known any better? They would have thought the estate was abandoned. The house sat on top of the tall hill and was in desperate need of repair. It was very dark, with tall windows, a steeple, and pointed gables. All the windows needed to be washed, and most of them were broken. Half the steps leading to the front door had caved in. Everything on the property was either dead or overgrown. The entire estate was surrounded by a tall iron fence. 2 suited guards patrolled the only entrance at the front. Whoa, Connor said. This may be trickier than we thought. The trio walked up to the guards in a very friendly, non-thief-like manner. Excuse me, Alex said to one of the guards. Is this where Cinderella's stepmother lives? The guard glanced over to the other guard with an irritated look on his face. This is the residence of Lady Iris and her daughters, the guard said, and yes, this is the Queen's stepmother. Why is it so protected? Connor asked. The other guard made a face at him. You're not from around here, are you? He said. Lady Iris is not liked around these parts. The fence is for her protection from the people who vandalized her home. Lady Iris didn't even bother fixing things anymore. There is no point. Alex looked up at the house with a heavy heart. Even with knowing how poorly the stepmother had treated Cinderella, she couldn't help but feel sorry for her. One of the higher windows was open, and she saw white drapes flicker inside. Someone was watching them from the house. Can we meet her? Alex asked. What did you say? Meet Lady Iris? The guard asked with a rude laugh. No, I'm afraid not. Lady Iris never takes any visitors. Run along now, back to wherever you came from, the other guard said. Connor nudged Red. This was her cue. She cleared her throat and looked up at them with large, bright eyes. Gentlemen, I know it's hard to recognize me without my proper hood over my shoulders, but I'll give you another chance before I go weary, Red said with a haughty smile. The guard said nothing. They didn't recognize her at all. Red became frustrated and her cheeks turned pink. I am Queen Red Riding Hood of the Red Riding Hood Kingdom, she said. A guard raised an eyebrow and looked at her sideways. If you're Red Riding Hood, where's your staff and sheep? He said, half laughing as he spoke. That's little Bo Peep, Red yelled and stomped her foot. The twins were growing frustrated too. They hadn't planned on this setback. Let them in, a frail voice said from the high window of the house. The guards were surprised by the command. Clearly this had never happened before. All right, the lady says you can go inside, the guard said. He opened the screechy gate behind them, and Red and the twins went through it. They carefully walked up the front steps, and Connor knocked on the door with enormous spade-shaped knockers. They heard frantic whispering and hurried footsteps inside. It took a moment for anyone to answer the door. The large door swung open, and 2 awkward women cautiously peeped from behind it. Hello, Alex said. May we come inside? The 2 women decided Red and the twins were safe and stepped out from behind the door. They were both very plain and plump, although one shorter and heavier than the other. Each had curly brown hair and thin lips. They were the kind of women who had the potential to be pretty, but had let themselves go over the years. They fidgeted with their lacy dresses as if they had gotten ready in a hurry. Alex nudged Connor. They both knew without a doubt they were facing Cinderella's ugly stepsisters. Please come in, the taller of the 2 said with an overdramatic gesture. The twins and Red took a step inside the house's entrance hall. A large staircase curved up and above them. The entire house was an absolute mess. The floors were dirty, the windows were dusty, and foul odor lingered in the air. Twins wondered if Cinderella had been the last person to clean the house. Forgive the mess, shorter of the 2 said. We weren't expecting company. Shocking, Red said under her breath. No worries, Alex said. It's just very lived in. A loud creak came from above him. Girls, don't be rude, said a voice. Introduce yourselves. Red and the twins looked up to see the infamous wicked stepmother herself, standing at the top of the stairs. She was very thin, and her hair was graying and done up in an impressively high bun. Her makeup was splotchy and smeared as if she had freshened herself in a rush. She held a cane as she wobbled down the stairs. Welcome to our home. I'm Lady Iris, and these are my daughters, Petunia and Rosemary, she said, and the taller one curtsied, followed by the shorter one. The stairs creaked so loudly beneath her, it was hard to hear what she was saying. Hello, Lady Iris Ritson. I'm Queen Red Riding Hood, and these are my second cousins, Hamlet and Ophelia. The twins cringed at the sound of their allies. Pleasure, Connor said, and gave Red a dirty look. The stepmother nodded cordially, but her eyes held many questions. Yes, I recognize you from Princess Hope's first birthday celebration at the palace, Lady Iris said. Oh, yes, of course, Red said, surprised to share the memory. I remember meeting you there as well. We didn't stay very long, Lady Iris explained. It's hard leaving home when people boo and hiss you wherever you go. She laughed, even though no one found it funny. Will you please join us in our sitting room, Your Majesty? Red and the twins followed the stepmother and her daughters into the next room. The stepsisters tried picking up the house as they went, but there was so much clutter the twins didn't see why they bothered. The sitting room had blue walls and white seats. It would have looked like a bright blue sky if it had not been covered in a thick layer of grime. As it was, it resembled an overcast day. They all sat down and dust filled the air. Connor held a cough the best he could. You must forgive the state the house is in, Lady Iris apologized. My girls and I are useless when it comes to housework, and it's hard to find help when you have a history like ours. I imagine, Connor said. So what brings you to our humble abode, Your Majesty, Lady Iris asked. Red had no idea where to start, saying that she wanted to build a country home that resembled the one they sat in would have been an obvious lie. Well, Red said, Ophelia, why don't you explain? Red and Connor turned to Alex, completely putting her on the hot seat. Alex looked up at her stepmother with a lie forming in her head, but she was distracted by several paintings of animals that lined the walls. What beautiful paintings, Alex said, changing the subject. Whose works are they? Petunia's mouth fell open and wasn't used to being complimented. I painted those, she said, with large, excited eyes. Petunia is quite the gifted painter, Lady Iris bragged. She does animal portraits mostly, but she's been working on landscapes. Her voice was smooth and dreamy, as if she were a saleswoman. I like animals, Petunia said enthusiastically, so happy to talk about herself. I usually paint the ones I see outside my window. Sometimes they're pets, sometimes they're pests. Animals have always liked me, too. There's something trusting about me, I guess. Anyway, it gives me something to do. Red and the twins nodded politely. Well, that's exactly why I'm here, Red said. I recently adopted a dog, and I was hoping you could paint a portrait of him. Alex and Connor were sort of relieved, mortified by Red's sudden ad lib. Petunia's bottom lip quivered. Really? She asked. I would love to. I like to bake, Rosemary yelled, desperate for attention herself. The outburst caused the others to jump in their seats. Sorry, I didn't mean to shout. I just like to cook and would love to cook if you let me. Rosemary is an exceptional baker, Lady Iris boasted. She cooks all of our meals at the house. Well, someone has to, otherwise we starve, Rosemary said with a laugh, although it wasn't funny. Laughing through misery must have been a family trait. Both their stepsisters were so excited to show off their talents they could barely sit still. Lady Iris, however, was still looking at her three guests skeptically. What do you usually bake, Connor asked Rosemary. Rosemary, why don't you go prepare a batch of your mushroom biscuits for our guests? And Petunia, why don't you go to your room and gather other samples of your paintings to show Her Majesty, Lady Iris said. The stepsisters leaped to their feet and collided into each other, running opposite directions in the house. They could hear the stairs creaking as Petunia ran up to her room. Rosemary disappeared behind the swinging door into the kitchen. For a split second, the twins outside the stacks of dirty dishes piled inside. Once her daughters had left, Lady Iris dropped her cordial face and glared at Red and the twins with a suspicious stare. "You have lovely daughters," Red said with a tight smile. "Save it," the stepmother said sharply. "I lived in this house alone with my daughters for years. I know Petunia is a lousy painter, and Rosemary is even a worse cook. Why have you actually come here today?" They didn't answer her. Red and the twins didn't have to look at one another. No, they were all sporting the same doe-eyed expression. "I see," Lady Iris said, after they didn't respond. "You've come to mock an old woman and her daughters, then, have you? Come to laugh at the black sheep of the kingdom? How dare you, especially at a time like this?" Lady Iris struggled to get to her feet as she could escort them out. "I'll show you the door," she said. "Why did you do it?" Alex said abruptly. Lady Iris turned back to her. "Excuse me?" she said. "I bet that's not a question you hear very often, but I've always wondered, why were you so cruel to Cinderella?" Alex said. "Why did you dislike her so much?" "Alex, how is this helping our cause?" Connor whispered to her, but she waved him off. Lady Iris stared her down, searching for a malicious motive behind her question, but Alex didn't have a malicious bone in her body. Lady Iris went to the side of the room to a small fireplace. A very dusty portrait was hung over it. Lady Iris took a deep breath and blew the dust off the painting. It was of a very attractive and dignified man with auburn hair and a full beard. "Who is that?" Alex said. "My late husband," Lady Iris said. She stared up at him with her back to the twins. "Does he look familiar?" The resemblance was so blatant they didn't have to think twice. Cinderella was the spitting image of her father. "Ella has always looked just like her father," Lady Iris said. "Her father nicknamed her Cinderella when she was a toddler because she loved playing in the fireplace. She would cover herself in so much soot and ash she was unrecognizable. When her father died, I found it unbearable to look at her face. I forced her to do countless filthy chores around the house, covering her appearance so she wasn't a constant reminder of what I lost. Now the face I had spent so many years trying to hide is one of the most recognizable faces in the world." The stepmother slowly creased the wedding ring she still wore on her left hand. Red looked at the twins in the corner of her eye. They were all three thinking the same thing. They had found her most prized possession. "So you don't hate her then?" Alex thought out loud. It wasn't jealousy. It was heartache. Lady Iris lowered her head. "I'm twice the widow, but half the woman Cinderella is," she said. "When the way I treated her was revealed to the rest of the kingdom and my daughters and I became hated across the land. Cinderella had the fence built and had the guards placed around our home so we'd be protected. She visited to apologize to us. Can you believe that? After all we had done to her, she felt guilty about what her marriage to Prince Chance had done to us. In your defense, it seems like the story had been exaggerated a bit," Connor said. "Your daughters aren't ugly, for example. They're just average looking." The stepmother sat down across from them. "Indeed," she said, "the kingdom has always loved mocking us. I heard a rumor that after the ball when the prince visited, the girls tried to cut off part of their feet to get them inside the glass slipper. Such nonsense!" Lady Iris looked at them vaguely. She had nothing else to tell them. "Well, is that all you were after then? An old woman's useless confession?" she asked. "No, to add salt to the wound, but that hatred is actually why we're here," Connor said. "This is going to sound crazy, but we're on a bit of a quest." "Connor, I don't think it's smart to tell," Alex tried to say. "Why not? It's not like we have anything to lose at this point," he said and continued with his explanation. "We think we found a way to defeat the Enchantress. It requires to go on a bit of a treasure hunt. Your ring is one of the items we need." "Excuse me?" the stepmother said, appalled by the request. "Your granddaughter's life is in danger," Alex said. "Don't you want to help her?" Lady Iris looked away to hide the shame in her eyes. This was evidently a sore subject to her. Grandmother is not a title I consider myself worthy of, she said. A grandmother is the mother of a child's mother, and I have never been a mother to Cinderella. The room went quiet. The stepmother had to calm herself down from the emotional declaration. Well, it's not too late, Red said. Giving us your ring would be quite the noble act. It would be the most Cinderellian thing you could do. Your status in the community may change when people find out you helped us. With this said, the twins could see a spark ignite in Lady Iris's eyes. They knew if they could speak with her for a little while longer, they might be able to convince her. Unfortunately, the kitchen door swung open, and Rosemary brought a tray of her mushroom biscuits in the room, bringing the conversation to a halt. Who wants mushroom biscuits? Rosemary asked happily. The energy had completely changed in the room since she left, and she couldn't figure out why. Lady Iris stood again. You have to wrap them up, Rosemary, she said. Our guests were just leaving. Leaving, said Petunia, walking the room with several rolled-up portraits on her arm. But I just found my best paintings. Red and the twins rose to their feet, too. No, your mother is right. We better get going, Red said. After further consideration, I think it may be getting rid of my dog. I have suspicions he may be a wolf. It's a long story. We'll be in touch about the portrait if I should acquire another pet. The stepsisters' faces clouded over with disappointment. Petunia threw her portraits to the floor. Rosemary went back to the kitchen and dumped the biscuits into a brown sack for them to take. Here, Rosemary said, through an enormous frown as she shoved the sack into Connor's head. Eat them soon, they could spoil out the first few hours. Lady Iris walked Red and the twins back through the entrance hall and the front door. The twins kept glancing at each other, waiting for the other to do something. Alex thought her brother's method was tackling her might be the only option. Lady Iris opened the door for her visitors, but blocked them from leaving. Wait, she said to the twins as they passed them. She slipped her wedding ring off her hand and placed it into Alex's. Make sure to tell Cinderella I gave it to you. Red and the twins couldn't believe their eyes, but their spirits soared. We will, Alex promised her. Thank you, Connor said. I'm going to personally issue a statement to let people know you aren't the mean old tart everyone thinks you are, Red shrugged and hugged her. The stepmother forced a smile. Unfortunately, some sins are forgiven and the others are not forgotten. She said, I'm afraid the only place we could live free of judgment would be another world completely. But one day, long after I am gone, I hope Cinderella can tell her daughter I did something to help her. She will, Alex said. Thank you. Lady Iris gave a shallow bow, but not completely sure she had made a good decision. She shut the door behind them, and the twins jumped with joy. Red and the twins passed the guards, who didn't understand why the three of them looked so happy after spending an afternoon in that house. Red and the twins walked down the path and found Froggy waiting for them at the Royal Pumpkin Remains exhibit. Well, he asked, how did it go? Alex opened her hand and showed him the ring. We got it, Connor shouted. We got the ring. An incredibly wide smile lit up Froggy's face. He picked them up and swung them around. Well done, children, he said, and Connor shot him with a look. Forgive me, young adults. Red had quietly waited for praise of her own, but none came. I wasn't too bad myself, she said. Of course you weren't, my darling, Froggy said, and Air kissed her cheek. Now let's get back to the granny and share the victory with the others. Froggy led the way back through the countryside to see their flying ship. Goldilocks was thrilled to hear the success, but Jack was nowhere to be found. He went into town to pick up some supplies, Goldilocks said. He'll be back soon, but in the meantime, let's see if the Wonder Minute is all it's cracked up to be. They placed the Snow Queen's ice scepter to the center of the lower deck floor. Alex was still gripping the stepmother's ring so tightly it dug into her palm. How is this supposed to work? Alex said. Is it just like the wishing spell? Do we need all the items together for anything to happen? Connor shrugged. Let's find out, he said. Alex carefully placed the ring on the floor beside the scepter. The five of them waited impatiently for something. anything to occur. Anticipation was even getting the best of Claudius, who was curled up in the corner watching from afar. "Well?" Fred said. "Shh," Goldilocks silenced her. The ring started to quiver. The scepter began to move as well. Suddenly, the ring magically attached itself to the tip of the scepter as if it had been magically pulled. The room cheered. Alex and Connor hugged each other. Claudius barked up at them happily, although he wasn't sure what the celebration was about. It was a small occurrence, but it was the most meaningful part of their journey so far. All of their efforts hadn't been a waste. They were building the wand. Jack emerged from the steps to the lower deck a second later. He had just returned from his trip into town and carried a bag full of vegetables and bread. "Jack, the wand is working," Connor said. "Wait, what's wrong?" They had been so immersed in celebration they hadn't noticed Jack's long face. "Jack, what's happened?" Goldilocks asked him. "While I was in town, I heard some troubling news," he said. The room grew very quiet. "What is it?" Froggy said. "The Enchantress has attacked the Corner Kingdom," Jack said. "She's knocked down Rapunzel's tower." Alex and Red gasped. Froggy's large mouth fell open. Connor was still listening, expecting to hear more. "So," Connor asked, "it's just a tower. What's the big deal?" He glanced over to his sister and saw tears running down her face. "Am I missing something?" Connor asked. "It could have been much worse. Thankfully, no one is dead." Froggy cleared his throat, emotion building up inside of him. "Much like the Hoodians' wall, the tower is very sacred to the people of the charming Corner Kingdom," he explained. "It represents their queen and the beginning of their country. It symbolizes their history and their spirit." Alex dried her tears and thought to herself, of all the awful things to do, why was Esmea picking off things that were symbolic, valuable to the kingdom? Why was she attacking people's spirit of all things? "I just realized something," Alex said. "Everything Esmea has ever done, the tower, the wall, the plants, the kidnappings, it's all been an attack on people's spirits. It's not a casualty the Enchantress wants. It's souls." Alright, that is the end of Chapter 18. I hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more from The Land of Stories, The Enchantress Returns, and more books to come. If you have any recommendations for me, don't forget to comment below if you want to put those in. And also, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. And I hope you enjoyed the reading. Bye!